the same time, here I want us to think about this title gender trouble that Judith Butler's talking about as a type of, no matter what gender categorization scheme you pick up, no matter which one you say the quadratic scheme works and you pick it up, there's still this irreducible, troubling aspect of gender. It's almost like no matter what gender you pick, there's a emotionally troubling aspect of it. That in some sense you could say that one of the troubling aspects of it is that no categorization scheme really succeeds to hold itself in time and to balance itself. You know, everything is irreducibly temporal. It emerges and falls away, and every balance that's mediated ultimately becomes once again chaotically imbalanced. So here the idea I want to propose to you guys is, what if the emergence of these multiplicity of categories is not that there's not an infinite number of expressions of gender like we expressed last time, but that we're actually trying to mediate the transcendence of sexuality itself. And here the idea I want to ask us to think about, which we discussed last time, is this idea of same difference. It's a beautiful word, this idea of same difference. That in some sense, we are all the same difference, which is an uncategorizable chaotic imbalance, and that all failures to categorize gender are a reflection of this. So let me give a quote, and then hopefully I can zero in on where our conversation might be able to go with this. From Slavoj Žižek, quote, "The addition of asexual as well as questioning to the series of sexual positions listed by the partisans of LGBT+ is crucial and unavoidable. The endeavor to liberate sexuality from all binary oppressions is set free in its entire polymorphous perversity, necessarily ending up in the abandoning of the very sphere of sexuality. The liberation of sexuality has to end up in the liberation of humanity from sexuality." So the crucial notion here is the liberation of sexuality has to end up in the liberation of humanity from sexuality. So what I want to say here is that when we use our quadratic categorization scheme, you know, masculine man, feminine man, feminine woman, masculine woman, these genders are basically being used practically to mediate sexual difference. But if we're thinking about the difference as such, we are all the same difference. We have to think about the process of leaving the sexual field itself. So here the idea I want to give to you guys both is, think about how in every single divorce, what's listed is the term irreconcilable differences. This irreconcilable differences is the inability to see that we are all the, quote, same difference. And when we're all the same difference, you cannot put them into a one. So such entities who can embody this strange difference, this what we talked about in previous podcasts as a type of third category for all identities, could in some sense, here's what I would say, is the signal of the sign of the transhuman, the real transhuman, not the artificial intelligence transhuman, but the human that's willing to transcend the very conditions of its being in sexuality. And that this is basically saying that if you're in a sexual relationship, it's useful to use this quadratic categorization scheme. But if you're not in a sexual relationship and you're thinking about the territory beyond sexual difference, then you're becoming the difference as such. In other words, the site of the sexual difference has been internalized, and that this might be crucial to understand the struggle for art, creativity, and higher consciousness. So I'll send that to you, Kevin, and see what you make of that.
quite a send. It's quite a send. I mean, this one is, as I listened to you, I realized our first discussion maybe went into a lot of the obvious and now I believe somewhat overplayed discussion around gender. And like, it's kind of like this new civil rights movement is how I've started to look at it, like fighting for more genders or more pronouns or equality of all kinds of, the LGBTQ plus umbrella, which I'm all for that. That seems like a good thing. Like let's equalize and offer rights to everyone. That's almost to me absurd that we're not doing that. But to me, the real issue posed by what you're saying and gender itself is, it just comes back to sex, God, and death. Like, why is it that sexuality is so important for identity that this would even be such an issue? Because if we were really concerned with identity as it pertains to other things like personality traits or competence or vision or leadership or all these other things that we could base it on, nobody would be concerned with, like in the 1950s, like there's homosexuals in our neighborhood, this is eating us away from the inside, these deviants. It's like that's an absurd notion to me, because I can, as a meta-human, which is the word I would like to use for what you described wonderfully, Cadell, the transhuman, the human starting to peek beyond the very categories that we've been handed down, by the way. There's no preset categories on what humanity can be. They've been handed down by culture. Most of them handed down by religious culture, because religious culture contains the secret duty of giving us the blueprint of humanity. Science is now taking up this mantle a little bit, right? Apparently our ancestors were sea sludge in a great ocean. But I think it's interesting, right? I'm being a little cheeky, but I think it's interesting that identity is so important as linked with sexuality. That's the point I want to make. And then in regards to the quadratic formula, to me, it's like physics. They keep discovering new particles, like as they breach beyond the neutrino and the lepton and the quark layer. They call it the particle zoo. Like quantum mechanics has completely lost track of trying to like get quanta for matter. It's like, oh, we figured it out. It's like, no, there's 10,000 more. Some of them travel backwards in time. Some of them are made of antimatter. It's like science fiction. In the same way, you can't categorize human identity and sexuality, at least not with the language we now possess, which again is a running theme that I think we run up against in this book and our trialogues a lot. Language itself has to evolve if we want to get to a better understanding around why sexuality is so core to our humanness, why it links to identity, and why trying to bucket it into these little neat categories that play well together, whether based on genitalia or based on preference or based on postmodernism, if you want to be asexual or anti-sexual, it's really interesting to me that it like you nailed it, Cadell, the chaotic equation of this will resist being measured. And I think it will continue to do so. So I'll send it to you, Daniel.
Thank you, gentlemen. Beautiful introduction, as always. Love it. As we have been really discussing gender the last time and how we're discussing it today, it really bridges the gap that we had somehow to find words to talk about something that is not overall deconstructive, but is practical. And on the other hand, trying to find the same difference, like the uniqueness of everyone, is quite difficult when we try to talk about. So what I was seeing is that on one hand, we try to find a way to transcend sexuality, to get out of our self lack of being somehow, because we find something in the other by the attraction we're following. And this might be like the fulfillment or the transcendence of the sexuality. So I think there are spiritual masters and people also in science and art that could say from themselves they have realized themselves, they are fulfilled with themselves. So then the partner is maybe just a bonus to the life. You know, it's not a need that you're thriving for as something that you're lacking in yourself. So that is about the sexual difference. When it comes to identity and gender, which is based on gender, is based on the identity. That's basically how we name things, how we think about things, how we think about ourselves. With the name comes the thought, and it somehow escapes immediately from the reality that you feel, because you give it a name, then you put it out of the here and now. And by that, in academic discussions, it has become a total multiplicity, which in turn shows again the search for something more real. And in between, when we thought about the four distinctions of man, male, female, male, male, female, woman, and masculine, female. So here I got it. And maybe also the double spirit. Then what I was thinking that as we had the Cartesian split of body and mind, it is also very, I think it has been useful for somehow, but for example, when we look into Chinese traditional Asian traditions, where the energy is always something that mediates between the physical and the mental, or the matter and the spirit, or the mind. There is in between energy. It is there where we could locate the four distinctions or the five distinctions, including the double spirit. When we say we're talking about an energy that is actually moving somehow the balance or the imbalance that we're facing in relation to each other. And then the question still stays there. What kind of relation is it that? Is it thriving from a sexual desire? How can we free ourselves from that? And how we can transcend it on a very practical term without getting into a monastery or just trying to avoid to see another woman. Yeah. So I leave it here with these questions for you.
Okay. I think starting with what Kevin was saying about gender being overplayed and gender being connected to identity, so important for like that our gender identification is so important for our sexuality, is that it could be that the overplaying of gender precisely signals this sexual anxiety that we can't speak about, like that we have to overplay the gender identification game in order to, as it were, keep at a distance this chaotic sexual difference which resists any gender categorization. So basically instead of saying there's this chaotic sexual difference which can't be spoken and which we can't put into a categorization scheme, we say, let's over-identify with the gender categories. Let's over-identify with gender categories. It's like erecting an enormous shield. And at the same time, I think we all have a feeling or an impression that whatever shield we erect, quote, erect, we won't be able to, in the end, stop the process of going deeply and confronting this chaotic sexual difference itself. Because I think it's also true what Kevin said, that even if we propose a quadratic formula, you know, maybe it is more like this parallel motion in quantum mechanics where all of a sudden there really is an endless number of other possible identities. We'll have a quadratic formula, we have a binary formula, we have a quadratic formula, we come up with a 12 category formula ultimately, but in the end, it's taking us further and further away from the core, which is this reaction to a chaotic sexual difference. So in my mind, the question is, if you want to engage with this chaotic sexual difference with another person, that's the first question. Do you want to engage with the chaotic sexual difference with another person? If so, then you will probably need categories which are both have some sort of binary structure, whatever they are, and they'll also have to be dynamical, because you're dealing with a real that's chaotic and will constantly be chaotic. That's the first point. And if you're going to engage with this chaotic sexual difference with another person, I think what's absolutely crucial is that you recognize that the dynamical interaction will force your identity to change constantly if it's going to maintain its balance, and that the overall goal of this relationship isn't about merging with the other person, but it could be producing a child in terms of a baby. That could be what it's about. That's what it often has been about. It could also be producing a cultural baby, not a biological baby, but a cultural baby. It could be some big joint project which brings together these energies in an interesting way. That also would be very interesting to do. But if you're not going to, if you don't want to engage in the sexual difference with another person, then I think that it brings you to this notion of either transhuman, metahuman, where you engage with the difference as such in yourself. And what gets birthed out of this process to me would, if you're with another human, it might be a biological or a cultural baby. But if it's just with yourself, then what you might be birthing is some sort of very deep personal project to become something very different that the world has never seen before as an individual. I'm thinking here, like the figure that comes to my mind is Osho. Osho would be a good example of an individual who used the sexual difference in himself. He said, according to Osho, we shouldn't get married, we shouldn't bond with another human, we should go deeply into sexuality, but only to transcend and to become something alien to ourselves. So I like this. I mean, both options are interesting, but those would be the pathways that I would see as what the gender trouble is intimating. So what I want to throw, before I throw it back to Kevin, what I want to intimate here is that when Butler produces the book Gender Trouble, what she's doing, I think, is saying, whoa, hold up. All of the categories are problematic. Categorization itself is problematic. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't categorize, but we should understand categories as this mediation of a real emotional tension. And the categories The categories gain their reality by insofar as you reach your internal limit of emotional anxiety. When you reach your internal limit of emotional anxiety, then you erect the category. I could go a little bit deeper into that, but I'll send it to you, Kevin.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love that you bring up Osho. I deeply love that man's work, even though his life and times may have been very controversial. But I think he was riding the edge of that difference so radically that you can't help but be controversial when you butt up against a society who has built many systems to suppress it for a long, long time, millennia upon millennia. So it's a fascinating thing. And you know, this is the idea too in the Greek thought and the great poets and artists of ancient Greece. They talked about having a relationship to the muse herself, like the very essence of the feminine, of erotic creativity, of artistic power. That was their lover. And obviously they also had lovers, but it's almost like, you know, and the alchemists talk about this too. That's what I feel when you share that, Cadell. It's like there's something happening inside the human being, and the psychedelic experience intimates this, that is so alien and is so titanic in feeling and emotional material that it can be seen as an other. And perhaps our fear of that is what drives us to an external other, you know? There's something profound there. And I don't pretend to know that much about it because I've just tiptoed there. And um, you know, the aspect of creativity itself is erotic. So when you think about identifying as an artist, is it that much different than identifying as a more radical gender molecule in the arrangement, right? Because if you're truly artistic and you're truly living at your edge and you're truly deviating from norms in all ways, there is a very sexual nature to that. And that's why I think many poets and artists and musicians choose that lifestyle. And maybe it's they're seen as libertines, but that's actually the way they maintain equilibrium. Whereas if they were in a monogamous, sanctioned, binary, normative sexual structure, perhaps their creative energy wouldn't flow the way it was. So it's really interesting that you brought that up, Kiddo, because that's a whole nother line of thinking that I wonder about. And the other point I think that's coming up for me in this trialogue, which is going into interesting territory, which I like, um, is the issue of, you know, keeping a society together. So the other part of me understands and sees, yes, of course, if we want to keep reproduction rolling along and we want to keep human society and economies productive, these gender roles are highly useful for that. I'll never forget, I was at Burning Man, and there's a lot of like camps at Burning Man, obviously a mecca of self-exploration and expression. There's a lot of camps like dedicated to queer or, you know, gay or LGBT communities. And I ended up at one of these bars with my friends at some point. And they're really interesting people, but I'll never forget this gay woman, this lesbian, referred to heteronormative people as breeders. Like it was like a phrase. It was like, oh, there's just a couple breeders. And I remember that like blew my mind. And it's a very transhuman thing to say. Like, I mean, she was obviously maybe not a nice person when she said it, but looking down on humans that are continuing to procreate as the core modality in their relating. And that makes me wonder, you know, like, are we all going to be born in vitro, like in Huxley's Brave New World? Is there some kind of nightmarish future like the Matrix where human beings are grown? Certainly not a world I want to live in right now. And so how do we reconcile the metahuman, the Osho level mystic savant with traditional structures of civilization that took thousands of years to be built? I don't think they're going to shift overnight. Perhaps not even in hundreds of years can they be fully reconstructed, although the optimist in me hopes they can. And obviously sexual identity will have to be accounted for. So I pass it to you, Daniel. Let's solve the world's biggest problems on this podcast.
Thank you very much. I can so much relate to the distinction that you draw, Kevin, because I for myself have often like the feeling, okay, let's get out of the wheel of samsara and meditate and get the shit out of here, you know. And on the other side, I also have the wish to be a breeder, you know. And make family, make children, be a dad, and continue evolving in this creation of life, you know, and continue the cycles of life. So these two wishes are in the heart of my of my yeah longings, I can say. And again, also this kind of longing is something that keeps us moving somehow. We want to transcend, we want to give something further, we want to move beyond our limits, our physical limits. We want to give something that maybe will hold on when we pass by. And this can be children, this can be books, this can be whatever. So and more interesting, I also see that when you look into the master lineages of Buddhism, for example, how much they appreciate their accomplished masters, you know, how they appreciate also Buddha, you know, so they keep him alive on earth by the memory, but they escape suffering, you know, or they find a way to be okay with it, you know. So and at that point where I say where you can find in yourself this anxiety, this contradiction, and you can reconcile yourself with yourself, you know, which is basically there is nothing more to antagonize, you know. That's a pretty huge discovery of self. If there is something like that in that terms, I'm pretty influenced by Buddhism right now, where you say, well, you become just emptiness with full of compassion. And when it comes to that process, to be there, I also see this dichotomy very crucial, that you can find it in yourself, that you're looking for different energies to reconcile in yourself. It could be yin yang, it could be masculine, feminine in yourself, but it can be also show up in your outer world. And at some point of this development, the inner world and the outer world, they merge as the same. You know, that is where also what you wish for just manifests. You know, that is also the red pill that tells you that you create your reality. But are you able to handle this? Because you have to have a really good straight mind if everything that you wish for just appears in the moment, you know. So for some people that had experienced maybe a bad trip or something like that, you know, when they get in this turmoil of, oh my God, and then they see it in the outer world, oh my God, and they get bigger into shit. Same in the other way, you know. But the less you want, actually, the less you can find energy. Actually, it is energy that brings you up, but it is also like the avoidance of spending that energy on thought, on action, on sexual reproduction, that could lead you out of this turmoil. And I experience myself, the less I want, the more appear the things that you wanted, you know. And in a spiritual path, it is that shows up like the demons, like the seduction, like the fame, or whatever comes into your way before you reach a point of enlightenment, how it's told by the story of Buddha or Siddhartha. And I think it's really interesting that even love is considered as a demon that stays in your way to enlightenment. So I'm pretty more going to that side of the Buddha pathway. I say, well, I'm done with that. I'm done with that, huh? And I'm not sure if I can hold this view to say I'm really done with that. You know, I said this before too, and then I have fallen into love or into distractions or into worldly things that keep me moving and kept me in pleasure and kept me in safe spaces. Yeah. So from a point of development, the yin and yang that is in yourself, I think plays itself out exactly the same way as in the outer world. Otherwise, you don't get any further. That's when the people just meditate on. They don't change what they wish for in their suggestions that they play out in meditations. So I don't know. I leave it like there, hoping to get some free pathways to think further if there is a middle ground where you could actually follow a Buddhist path to enlightenment, and although have a relationship, you know, that is actually my biggest hope for humanity, you know. Yeah.
I don't want to break your bubble, Daniel, but I'm not sure. I don't think so.
He doesn't see it. Doesn't see it happening.
I can say that Osho called himself the spiritualist who is attempting to bring together Buddha and Zoroaster in the figure of Zarathustra. For Osho, Buddha was the awareness, and Zoroaster was the love. And the problem with love, Daniel, is that there's no middle ground, I'm afraid to say. So love is the most, if you're going to bring love into the equation, really, it's something that brings you to your knees. It's something that kills you. It's something that shakes you. It's something that you can't be in a just meditative silence, peace, stillness, no suffering. That you can't. It's not what love is, unfortunately. It's just not. And I want to be, in some sense, forceful with that's the difference between the symbol of Buddha and the symbol of Jesus. The symbol of Jesus is the symbol of love, and it's one of the sword, the imbalance, the throwing oneself into the abyss, the sacrificing of oneself, the going through enormous pain. It's that's what love demands, in some sense, in my view. And it's I think here, let me just connect that assertion with what both of you, I think, were saying about the difference between the heteronormative breeders and the transgender who's going beyond breeding. Is that if you are in the heteronormative breeders, and you have two people who are going to reproduce, it's inherently going to involve pain. One, the woman is going to give birth. I don't know if you guys know what birth is, but it's extremely painful. It's a part of the process. All marriages involve this constant, it's not sitting in chaos, sitting in perfect silence, meditating, it's going through constant antagonism. That's, can you balance that? Can you love through that? Can you see that you're the same difference, or are you going to eventually come to the point of irreconcilable differences? So to me, the question is, on the one hand, you can choose the path of, sorry, I don't know if you guys hear this noise. There's a noise that's coming through, and sorry about that. Hopefully it stops. You can go through the path of breeding with the biological other. You can go to that path, but it's not going to involve the peaceful, sufferingless state. In order to do that, you do have to go to the monastery. You do have to become sort of you have to basically castrate yourself by stopping speaking. You have to go into the pure inner silence. That's an option. But if you go into the symbolic order and you're communicating with the others and you're reproducing part of the chain, that's going to involve suffering. It's and love as well. So to me, the crucial point is, are you going to breed, reproduce biologically? Are you going to withdraw, go into yourself? Or are you going to go into the cultural creative path? And that is creating a different type of, that's creating a different type of offspring, which is more on the, you could say it's taking to the transgender level. Now, the quote I want to sort of share, because it's sticking with me, is from a book I just have been reading called Love and Will by Rollo May. And in the book, he talks about how when people have children, the reason they're having children is because it feels like something real that they can't deny. In other words, to have a child is to basically say, well, I don't feel so real, but this feels real. This child is inside of me. This child depends on me. And that's the realest thing that I can do in this world. Now, I've also had friends who have, and I myself have said my PhD work or my books I write are like my children. But I have a friend who has published a book and had a child, and he said, I'm blown away at how more real my child is than my books. The child is so much more real than anything I can do. So on this question of the, being critical of the breeders, so to speak, is that let's keep it real. Until we've reached the level where we can actually produce something culturally that's more real than a child, then probably having a child is the most real thing you can do. But that's not to say that if you really dedicate yourself to the cultural pathway and you go all the way there, that you can become something extremely, extremely real. I would say that's what I would say that's what Osho was. Osho certainly, as a living embodied entity, was more real than most people. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you want to feel more and more real, and leave your mark here, then it's going to have to not just be the awareness and the removal of suffering. It has to be, that's a tool to go into love. And love is a disturbance. It's rocky road.
Yeah, beautiful. Chaos and order, love and breeding versus leaving the wheel of samsara on the mountaintop. I mean, this is age-old stuff, right? I mean, it's curious because I want both as well, Daniel. I want to create great cultural artifacts and be a father in the world, be an immortal cultural icon if it's possible. And I also don't want a lot of the toxic patterns of separation and the war on consciousness to continue. And that does require some form of renunciation. So, I mean, while we're on the topic, Osho did talk about the new man. He called it, he named the cafe at the ashram after it as well, Zorba the Buddha. Zorba the libertine, fully loving in the world, Gautama the Buddha, the renunciate, the mystic. And he spoke of the new man coming, right? The new human would have both qualities. And I certainly think, to bring this full circle, I certainly think that meta-human, that image of of humanity, isn't concerned about passing legislation on gender pronouns, and probably isn't getting super offended that their gender style or sexual style isn't supported by the state, because they're reforming the state itself by reformatting the individual, which the state is composed of. So there's something about this trend we're on right now that transcends these sexual identities and the identity politics that come along with it. This is a much more of a core level. And I totally agree, Cadell. Like, if you want to be in the world, you're going to have to fall in love. Maybe not with a human, but you're going to have to love something. And love is chaotic. Love is messy. We should invent a new verse, that famous Bible's verse, the Corinthians or whatever, that love is patient, love is kind. We need to have the accurate the postmodern version. Love is a chaotic attractor field. Love is a catastrophe. Love is a beautiful riot. It's like something like that. And, for the most part, that's true. And it's the most worth it thing there is, like in the movie Interstellar, I think Nolan did a great job. What binds the main character to his daughter across timelines and in the depths of a black hole and like in the fourth dimensional chaos is love. It lets him like track, and it's faster than light, and it binds him beyond time, even though he's in another timeline, literally. And I think he nailed it, because while the physics of that may not be proven or whatever, love is the thing that binds us. It frees us. It's a paradox, and it's worthwhile. Like, the suffering becomes worthwhile because of love. And that's an important, maybe the most important point about it. Human life isn't perfect. There's a lot of suffering, but if you have something to fight for, something to love, you can withstand almost anything. And human beings throughout time and terrible circumstances have demonstrated that. So it's incredible. This is like a whole nother chapter we're on, but I'll give it to you, Daniel. I don't know where we go from here.
Send that to you, Kevin.
I love it. I mean, we have been gone very far from the gender troubles into something more, to me at least, more meaningful to discuss. I love what you said, that love is when it is worth suffering. Oh, that's huge. And what I was seeing is that if you accomplish to realize yourself into your own uniqueness, your own oneness, it is somehow that you can be just in your calm, but the radiation of the love it's like this hurricane around this hole, you know, that creates actually the chaos, that creates the trigger around you. You know, if you are the one that disturbs your environment and you are just standing still, you know, radiating your love and getting projections of fear and of love at the same time, because you have been the one that stands still, that embodies the oneness in yourself. I mean, I think that that's really something that I'm thriving for. Yeah, and that is very meaningful for me, and that is where I see that all the risks that I've been taking in love or in my career or in my changing directions of life has been worth. You know, I always found a reason to live and to suffer and to go further and to try to perfectionize myself in front of relationships, in front of people, in front of myself. That to get to this pure acceptance without the antagonist inside of you that keeps me moving towards that aim is huge. And I mean, I see that I want to be in the life and not transcend somewhere and never come back. I had these experiences 2 times actually, that I had the choice somehow to say, okay, that's it, you know. But both of the time, it was love for the people that I have that draw me back. And I love that symbol, that there is like this hole or this emptiness in yourself where you just don't need to identify yourself anymore to create an antagonist of what you're not. That can on the other side have like this massive clouds moving around like a hurricane, creating the disturbances for cultural change that is needed to put yourself in the right place, to find like the yeah, the healing patterns of our time, to make the change, like to make this waters that coming from this hurricane really like a cleanse through your extensions that you're able to love actually. It's a hard and rocky road. It has downs as ups, but the suffering has been always worth it. It's always standing up one more time and falling down. I think that's like also the biggest topic that we find in the resurrection. Like, live one time better. You, Karel, you love to say, die one time better. How's this? Maybe I will change it to
Die again, die.
Die again, die better. I would say, live again, live better. So I pass it to you.
Better. So I wanna sort of summarize my thoughts on what we've been talking about by saying, okay, we fully confront, accept the quote unquote gender trouble. This notion that gender is in some sense in itself troubling. And I think that what we push towards in the conversation is that what the trouble is about is love. That's what the trouble is about, is that we have a deep, 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 need for love. We have a deep, deep need to be loved, to feel surrounded by love, and that, I guess in some sense, the absence of love requires that we create some gender idea that will help us to hold a certain type of love with another person. And I think we all agree that it could take many different categorization schemes, but it's ultimately about this trying to hold love with another person. And then you could choose to maybe, you could choose, okay, I'm going to love the other person. I'm going to create this gender identity to deal with that. Or you could take the more solo path, and you can create beyond loving to the other, and maybe a higher type of love is possible. I think that all I'll say here on this, if the real gender trouble is the trouble of love, I would like to propose two words. One is this persistence of perfectionism, and two is this persistence of the mess or the chaos. And to my mind, the only way I've had inner success with navigating love is to become less and less identified with the perfection and more identified with the mess. I am the mess. All of the mess is me. It's not that I'm perfection and the mess is something my perfection has to get rid of. It's that my perfection is my failure to actually confront myself, because I am all this mess. So what I'm upset about, what I'm suffering about, is that I don't accept myself. That's why I want to go to the monastery. That's why I want to go run into the forest, is because I actually don't accept what I am, which is a mess. And as soon as you know, hey, I'm a mess, all of a sudden it's not a big deal. It's really not. It's not that, okay, now I'm a mess, then I can do anything. It's that I'm a mess, and look how interesting I am. Look how interesting this is. Look at this storm I'm in, which somehow I'm co-implicated in creating. And then gender trouble, or the trouble of love itself, is how boring would it be to live in a universe with no differences? How boring would it be to live in a universe where we I don't know, where this mess wasn't here somehow? What would we be doing without the mess? It's a perspectival shift on the mess, or what you would say is this hurricane with the, I think both of you use this metaphor of a storm, a hurricane. And when you identify with the mess, I think it gives you that paradoxical Buddhistic, you could say, capacity to be still in the mess. Because here's the problem, is that the reason why the mess is such a problem for people is because everyone's so triggered by their ego. Like, the crucial thing is to lower the reactivity of your ego. When there's a mess, the ego reacts and it makes more mess. Whereas if you just are still in it, it's okay. It's almost like you want to be like you want to be a synthesis of a Buddha and a midwife. Here's a Buddha and a midwife, because the midwife, she's in the mess. The baby's being born. The baby's crying. The mother's crying. Everything is a mess. But the midwife is just, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. This is, and here I would say, this is the perfect complement to the midwife in the feminine form is the philosopher in the masculine form. The philosopher, as Socrates said, is the midwife of the idea. So as we're in a mess, thinking how to think, the philosopher should say, it's okay. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay. We're going to get this idea out. And that's my piece on the gender trouble. Go to you.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The birth metaphor just has so much mileage, especially this year in 2020. And I think with this issue, there's a mess, and it's a beautiful mess. It's a beautiful mess. That's really what it is. It's this seething, pulsing, organic, chaotic fucking trip that we're all on, being, a physical entity. And then we love and addict or obsess or create harmony or heaven or hell with other beings. So within that and navigating it, yeah, I think there's a beautiful philosophical baby that was birthed on this trialogue of probably been birthed many times before. The problem with gender and the necessity of gender is we love to love. And so how do we categorize it? How do we navigate it? And I think if the more of the maybe the gender community that traditionally champions these ideas could focus on that, would there be as many issues with the politics of it, or the in and the out groups, or the oppression, the perceived oppression, and the very real oppression? Not to downplay it at all, but somewhere in the middle, I think like the whole point gets lost, that no matter what gender camp or community or circle you run in, we're all just loving each other, and we're all wanting to love. So in the Buddhistic slash philosophicer, it's a new one, philosopher king, the Buddhistic philosopher king, also one of Plato's beautiful ideas, would make it possible for everyone to love with minimal resistance and without people judging the way others love. Obviously, with a civilization that functions and is healthy and values life and doesn't give way to decay and dehumanizing forces. So there is a middle road there. It's a middle road that's ridden by a hurricane known as love. That's a chaos. So it's not a tightrope walker. It's an angry rhinoceros barreling down the freeway, breaking glass. And that's what we have to deal with. So I say, have at it. Let's do it. Let's put some of this trouble to bed. That's it for me. What do you got, Daniel?
Well, I think when we look, for example, into nature, what I was thinking is like nature is there exactly in its proximity that it lost each other by exchanging this whole creation. But I think where we come really in big disturbances with the love is when the antagonism is so strong. And that's when we have a hurricane, actually, when we have like two poles that are just too different. So what I'm thinking at the end is like, on one hand, the too different is actually in the sexual. When it comes to love, it is the symbiotic. It is the mutual growth that can take place by the vulnerability to take part in another being's life, you know, and to be not one entity, but by love, by opening up to be something else too. You lost your ego and you get into this mess. But the the question that that I will keep following is like, what is like the environment that you place yourself as a multi-entity by embracing yourself with love? Can it be like the whole humanity? Is it only a Buddhist community? Is it the philosophical community? Is it the masculinity movement? You know, what is the embracement of love, you know, you're capable to embrace? And what is the proximity to your environment, so that the disturbances that you create by your love are kind of also in a symbiotic relationship to your neighboring entities, you know? So that is also maybe a pathway where you can accept the mass of being yourself with other masses of beings that you include in yourself, and your open heart vulnerability to say, well, that's what I love, that's what I do, that's what I am, and at the same time take part in this in this life that actually creates a mutual creation. You know, Jesus also didn't know about the whole world. You know, he knew about his world. Buddha did also know about his world. So we have Buddhism, we have Christianity, and they coexist. Uh, Although we try to aim for the love of whole existence. You know, but I think that's like the most difficult thing, really, not to hate anything what is going on, whatever time and whatever being. And accepting yourself as a mass, I don't know, it is the outer world, the inner world at the same time, I think. So I leave it there, that I still hold on the pathway that actually everything that is the mass out there is also the mass in yourself. And the beauty is that you can accept this all, and that there is the possibility to embrace it really fully. But I question if that is able with a sexual desire. Yeah.
Kev, not the mind. The mind will never the mind will never be able to do that. You have to
But
get
the
out of your
heart,
head.
Gotta go
The heart,
beyond
yeah.
it.
The heart, yeah.
the mind has to be empty, otherwise it makes a category.
You're right. Yeah. Right. 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 So I think we've done it. I think we've done a good job of isolating what the gender trouble is, this problem of categorization. The mind creates these categories. It creates more and more categories, thinking it'll solve it. But you could create an endless number of categories. It'll never solve it. It gets further away from what it is, which is the love. So I think we did a good job, guys. I think that was nice.
In our philosophical midwifery way, I think, yeah, we hit the mark. Always
Love you
interesting.
guys.
Yeah,
I
I
really
love
I
you
really
both.
like the metaphor of the philosopher as the midwife of the concept, the midwife of the idea. Just like
It's true. I think it's highly accurate.
Love to. That's good.
okay.
Let's
So
be midwife.
thanks everyone who's watching live, and if you're watching after this was broadcast, thank you guys all again. We went and tried to go even deeper into our book Sex, Masculinity, and God, talking about gender trouble. So yeah, if you want to pick up the book, we talk about all these issues: gender trouble, sexual difference, and here we're just trying to even go deeper. This is
Yeah,
just inexhaustible.
it really is. We're going to the next level. So if you're watching this live or later on, share this video if it touched you, or tag somebody that wants to jump into this conversation, because it's a deep one. And The book's on Amazon. You can go to sexmasculinitygod.com. We have it up there. We also have a discussion group on Facebook if you want to join in there, where we're posting other content and going into a little community discussion around these juicy topics. But we're really grateful for y'all. Gentlemen, it's been an honor once again. This has been Trialogue 14, and we'll see you guys next time.